And good evening, everyone. That's right, Bite Size Learning is back. I am your host and moderator, Dr. Mike Sevilla. And we have a great conversation that we're going to be coming up tonight. We're going to be talking about health equity. We have a great guest coming up. But of course, to start off, if you want to learn anything about the Ohio Academy of Family Physicians, just check out the website. It's just right down there. www.ohioafp.org. And we are ready here at Bite Size Learning for a great 2022. We have some great guests that we're trying to get for the rest of the calendar year. And then you can kind of see our archives of this show at the website. And you can also see it live and on demand on Facebook and YouTube. So we're going to be talking about health equity tonight. We're going to be talking with Dr. Christen Johnson, who was a fellow of the Ohio Academy of Family Physicians, their Health Equity Fellowship. So why don't we bring her on right now? So, hello, Dr. Johnson.
Hello, how are you?
Good, how are you? Thank you so much for joining us here this evening. I'm looking forward to a great conversation about health equity. I know you're very passionate about it, and we're going to have a great conversation here. So, but my first question is a fairly kind of very complicated, I like to stump my guests when they first come on. But Dr. Johnson, I just want to ask you, so why family medicine? Why is family medicine awesome? Why do you get up, for work every day? Why is family medicine so awesome?
So for me, I came into medical school knowing that I probably wanted to be a family doc. When I was about 3 years old, I had an ear infection, and my mom took me to an urgent care. And I met a Black female doc who let me listen to her heart and her lungs and play games with her stethoscope. And I came home saying I wanted to be a doctor. I did a program while I was an undergrad that gave me an opportunity to learn more about different specialties. And at that point, I thought I wanted to be an OB. But after having some conversation about kind of lifestyle and the fact that I clearly wouldn't be able to see a whole gamut of patients, but I would just be seeing female patients. I was just like, okay, well, I don't know if that is what I want to do forever, but I love the idea of delivering babies, and I was introduced to family medicine, and I fell in love with it. So that was it.
That's great. That's great. I mean, when we have guests come on this show, it's just I love talking with family docs about why they love to do what they do. Everybody has a different but similar story. So thank you for sharing your story. I'm really excited about talking about this fellowship and about your project. But first, for people who don't know who you are, who are not familiar with you, why don't you introduce yourself to our audience?
So, hi, everybody. I'm Christen Johnson. I am a family doc here in the Columbus, Ohio area. I work at Heart of Ohio, which is a federally qualified health center here in the city. I see patients, but I also do some programmatic development as far as our blood pressure group. And I also work with medical students down at Wright State. So it's a wonderful hodgepodge of things that I really enjoy.
Now, when you were in medical school, correct me if I'm wrong, you were in Dayton, and you had your Master's of Public Health, and you had maybe a little bit of a concentration in health disparities. Do I have that right?
So I actually got my Master's of Public Health while I was in med school. And I had a concentration in population health, but my culminating experience, or the easiest way to put it is kind of a thesis, was specifically around hypersegregation and health disparities. So yeah, I did a lot of work in race as a public health issue.
Yeah, can you describe a little bit about that work? And I mean, it's going to come out during our conversation, but maybe we can start out like your passion, for educating people about disparities, or you fighting for disparities. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I can say that I've probably been an advocate for the underdog for forever. I was the kid who would take on getting teased in order to make sure that the smallest kid in the class wasn't getting bullied. And so as I continued along with my career, I just found that one, oftentimes in underserved areas, people are left out. They don't necessarily get a voice. And then, two, when it comes down to health, that those issues spill over into their ability to get good health care, as well as their ability to do the other things they need to do in order to stay healthy. So, if you're in a situation where, let's say, you live in an area that doesn't give good job opportunities, and then you are expected to try to afford to pay for some types of medicine, or you are expected to try to get to some specialist office that closed early, maybe you can't do that. And so not only does that impact you, but then it impacts everyone in your community, because now if it's a disease that's communicable, you're contagious and you're probably still working. Or if it's a situation where it's just chronic disease, it increases the burden of disease in your area, but it also prevents you from being able to take care of the other things you need to do, like your family and your kids, and just being able to live a regular, fulfilling life. And I truthfully believe that one's race or where they live should not impact their ability to find good doctors and get the care they need.
Wow, wow. And I saw in your bio as well that issues like mentorship and leadership development are very important to you. I saw that you are or were named a COB Scholar. Can you describe a little bit what that is, and for people who are not familiar?
So the Cobb Institute has a program called the Cobb Scholars Program, where they allow a certain number of researchers a year to get mentorship opportunities, as well as assistance in the event that, let's say, you're doing a NIH grant or something of the sort. So they assist people who are interested in doing research around health disparities, as well as research support for physicians of color who are academic physicians.
Wow. um, yeah, I mean, how has that influenced your life, or how did you even find out about that institute in the first place?
So I have to say that mentorship has been a very large part of my life. I've definitely been blessed to have been led into different circles where I've been able to find mentors. When I was in undergrad, I was cutting through a building I had no classes in, and happened to find a poster for the Minority Association of Pre-Med Students, also known as MAPS. That is the pre-medical organization to the Student National Medical Association. So right away, I went to a meeting, decided to join, knew I wanted to be there. And then I was paired with a mentor who actually happened to be a medical student. Um, so shout out to Alan Jr. He was my mentor, and anything from my struggles with biochem and the normal pre-med, woe is me, I'm struggling in this class, I'm never going to be a doctor, to actually kind of walking me through the process of, like, what do I need to do to apply, and how to time my application properly, was all kind of spelled out for me by someone who'd already done it. That gave me an introduction to the Student National Medical Association. And so in the SNMA, I came in early. As I said, I've been to multiple conferences. And the thing is, you're surrounded by medical students and pre-meds who look just like you, who have the same issues when it comes to being one of the only people who looks like you in your classes, being one of the few people who is really speaking out for health disparities, health equity in your class. And for me, that was huge. So I became more and more involved in the SNMA. When I started medical school, I actually was our SNMA chapter president. And, I got an opportunity to see how the regional board worked, ended up being assistant regional director. And then I was tapped and blessed again to have wonderful mentors who said, hey, you probably should run for president, and ended up being the national president for the Student National Medical Association. So through all of that, I was then also introduced to the NMA, or the National Medical Association, where I had, again, more amazing mentors. And through some of those relationships, I was kind of tapped as like, hey, you might want to think about applying for this. This might be something that's, right up your alley based on the research you do. And it's worked out. So that's how I got introduced to the COB Institute, and it's been wonderful. I've really enjoyed working with them, and they have, like I said, given me all kinds of opportunities to learn more, and especially in some areas where I feel like those of us as family docs may not get as much support, because many of us are not necessarily working at an academic center. Many of us may work just directly in the community, and so they ensure that we're aware of deadlines coming up, we're aware of other opportunities that maybe don't have to deal with clinical research if you're not interested in that, or also helping you to prepare if you do want to work in clinical research. So it's been a wonderful opportunity.
Wow, wow. I mean, it's just yeah. I mean, just reading your bio, which is just so impressive, and it shows that you're very driven, and you have these goals that you want to accomplish. We have a lot of medical students that watch this program, and you mentioned mentors. If there's a medical student that's watching this program, and they're saying, hey, how can I find a mentor, or how can I reach out, or how can I get plugged in to somebody? What kind of advice would you have?
I think it's threefold. I think the first thing is to make sure that you are living your best authentic life. And when I say that, I mean, don't just pad your resume full of things just to say that you did things, but actually find things that you are passionate about. Because with the extra hours that you have to put in on top of being a medical student or a resident or a physician, if whatever it is you're doing is not feeding your passion, it's going to burn you out. So it's important to make sure that, the things you're doing you're actually passionate about. And then two, really aligning yourself with people who have similar passions. So for me, that was SNMA, it's been NMA, it's been OAFP, it's been AAFP. These are the organizations I've spent the majority of my time in. And so in being so involved in these areas, I'm meeting people who are able to help me figure out what my next step is. And for me, it's important to, consider, how did I get there? And consistently, my number three, remembering where you came from. For me, I am a only child from a single mom. I'm very close to my grandparents. I'm very close to my family in general. I love my city. I'm from Columbus, born and raised. So back home, actually working less than a mile from where I grew up. And so I'm serving this community, and it allows me then to have the passion to be able to say, hey, would you like to come and learn with me? Would you like to, work with me, as a medical student, come see what it's like to work in a federally qualified health center and give back. And so I think that for me is huge, just because, I feel like if you're living the life that God intended for you to live, not only does He put the people present for you to be able to say, hey, I'm interested in XYZ, can I come learn with you? But you also will find out kind of what your next step should be through those experiences.
Wow, wow. My guest is Dr. Christen Johnson, family physician and AFP Health Equity Fellow. So let's switch gears. Let's shift in talking about this Health Equity Fellowship. How did you find out about it? Maybe it was one of your mentors, I would guess. But for people who are not familiar with the Health Equity Fellowship, what is it all about?
So on the AAFP Health Equity Fellowship, I actually saw it come out in an email. I am one of those people who actually reads all the emails that we get. So we saw it come out, and I was a resident at the time, and I was like, ooh, like I would be interested in doing this, but clearly I'm a resident. I don't have time. And so I kind of sat on it, and I did some resident leadership opportunities on commissions in the AFP. And, as I mentioned, when you're doing something you're passionate about, it really refills your cup. And I can be very honest with Residency is a time that if you're not really taking good care of yourself, you can really get burnt out. And so for me, all of these extra experiences would refill my cup so that I could make it to the next meeting. And I'm just like, how cool would it be to have a whole year where I spent time, dedicated to learning more about health equity? So I applied, and it was right after everything had kind of boiled over with the combination of COVID and George Floyd and everything that was going on. And I said, you know, I have some experience under my belt with curriculum development. I have some experience under my belt with public health. What if we just like blended the two and gave the AAFP some kind of resource that we could use on a large scale to make sure our family docs are ready for the next step? Because we are now at a place where we can no longer pretend that the things that are happening in our world are not impacting healthcare. And as we're talking about, the disparities in people getting COVID, the disparities in people having access to, monoclonal antibodies and things like that, now, it's very clear that there are some serious racial disparities there. So how are we able to make sure that our workforce is ready?
And of course, you get more information at AAFP.org. Just reading from their website. Through this program, fellows will gain knowledge and experience in translating the concepts of health equity into clinical practice. Fellows will learn from leading experts in the fields of medical education, research, public health, and healthcare policy. With the support of mentors and AAFP staff, they will complete a capstone project at the end of the fellowship to demonstrate their achievements of the program's learning objectives. So obviously you get more information at AAFP. There's also some requirements there too, that time commitments and that type of thing, but you can get that at the AAFP website. So was it difficult to pick your capstone project, or was it something that was kind of brewing in your head for a while?
It was brewing, but I think the conceptualization of the project was a little more difficult. The more that I learned from the fellowship, the more that I wanted to include. And I knew that there was no way that I was going to be able to make something that was going to be fruitful if I didn't focus in. I also know that there are so many resources through the Everyone Project at AAFP, as well as like STFM and a couple of other different areas in family medicine. And I had used those things in residency for my residency research project and was like, well, how is it that we might be able to take these resources that are already, verified, have been created and validated, and apply them to teaching people specifically about health disparities and racial health disparities at that.
Okay. So it was a lot of his, like, accumulating resources was kind of a first step for you in going through this?
I think the first step for me was to kind of solidify the framework that I wanted to utilize. Once I was able to solidify a framework, then I started accumulating those resources and really finding that there were so many opportunities, so many things that we could use. But I created a framework called the Race in Medicine Framework. And this really sits under, and I'm going to go into some educational paradigm here, but this really sits under the idea of transformational learning, right? So as physicians, as we go through med school and residency, we really want people to learn skills, right? We all need to learn how to be good doctors. But in this particular area, we're asking people to maybe transform their ideas, transform the way they think. And especially when we talk about something like oppression, like racism, or even sexism, et cetera, it can get very difficult because society tells us these things shouldn't exist.
Right.
That in order to be a good person, right, that we shouldn't have these ideas or these thoughts or these feelings. Yet they are present in our society. And structurally, they cause problems. So in order for us to start making change, we have to address that they are present. And usually that's where people really get stuck. So the framework actually has two sets of questions that we use. The first set of questions is kind of just assessing, very academically assessing the situation. What is it that I need to know in this situation? What is it that this person needs from me? How can I potentially help? But also looking at other centered ideas. What is this person telling me? What are they feeling? What are they seeing? The second set of questions that this framework actually utilizes are reflective questions. And the transformational learning paradigm actually centers on critical self reflection. So, asking, what is it that I might be missing? What is it that I'm feeling right now, and why am I feeling that way? What are some other things that I need to be aware of in this area that maybe I don't know? And then digging further into how we deal with those feelings. So the processing of those things. When we look at what happens a lot of times in any difficult conversation, one, there's this area of vulnerability, but the other area is really fear, right? Like nobody wants to feel rejected in a conversation, and nobody wants to feel bad. And you have two sets of people. You have the person who's telling you what their feelings are that may feel rejected, as the person who puts up the wall because they're feeling bad about something that's happening, puts up their wall. And what this does is it allows the person to work through those feelings without shutting out the conversation. So in essence, those who go through the curriculum will have the support they need both internally to deal with whatever might be coming up with them as they're learning about racism and maybe reflecting on things like microaggressions, et cetera, that they may have done. But at the same time, it allows them to dive further into the material in really looking at what does the other person need from them and how do they meet the middle.
So how does somebody kind of work through, like, if I have a certain, if I answer these questions and there's a certain way I'm thinking, how would I work through personally if it's like, is this something that I believe, or is this something that I was programmed into me from the society from growing up? Like, is it, I know that's part of this process, but how would you deal with somebody who would have feelings like that? I don't know if this is really something that's down deep inside of me, or is it something that I have been programmed by society?
That is an incredible conversation. So I think the first thing is recognizing that there is something there and that there was a thought. And then we have to accept that these thoughts are programmed by society, so we all are going to have them. Unfortunately, even people of color may have thoughts that align with structural or systemic racism. So it's not something that necessarily is just all on one group of people. Everybody is going to have thoughts that come from what we're programmed. And then the next area of work that one has to do is really kind of digging through that exactly what you mentioned. So, do I honestly believe this? Where are areas that I may be able to find evidence that this is not true? Or is this a belief that I'm holding because this is something I'm noticing from home? And part of it is not to stop there and say, oh my goodness, I'm having these thoughts and this is bad and I shouldn't have these thoughts, so I'm not going to go any further. But it's to say, what do I do now that I know that I'm having them? So now that I've gotten down to understanding, that I feel, for example, people who come from a certain area of town are a certain way, or people who look a certain way are a certain way. Now, how do I reprogram? And a lot of that has to do with, as our AAFP implicit bias training will go into, really kind of restructuring our minds to new ideas. But then also there's a piece of the puzzle that really goes into not stopping at guilt, but allowing those feelings to drive us further. So when we do see this situation again that we've been presented with, that we've written about, that we're able to say, pause in our minds. I know that I had this thought before. What question do I need to ask this patient in order to get past this thought? And so it allows us to then learn and grow by using those uncomfortable feelings, because now we are aware that we're having these uncomfortable feelings and uncomfortable thoughts. Unfortunately, most people don't even know they have them. So again, the conversation gets a little difficult and it's complete shutdown because they're feeling something. They're not really sure what they're feeling.
Yeah, a lot of people are, I mean, I wouldn't say it. Well, yeah, we'll say they avoid this. They avoid this for a number of reasons, but a lot of reasons that I hear from people, especially family docs, is, sometimes, they don't feel safe. They don't feel like they're in a safe space, to kind of bring up some of these issues and topics and feelings. How does your curriculum or how does your program, how do you set up that kind of safe space, safe area?
So one of the things that we have to have in a safe space is really knowing the people around us. We're not going to feel safe if we're not in that area. And so there are some team building and community building activities. So the way the curriculum works, it's one session is meant to be done each week for 4 weeks. And so for each week, there is some kind of community building activity, which not only centers around personal identity, so our ability to say who we are, but also understanding the people who are around us. So it's an exercise in vulnerability on both sides. One of the things that Dr. Brookfield, who is a leading scholar on teaching about race and racism, especially when speaking to white Americans, is that for people of color, race is something you deal with every day. And it's something that you get up, you fully understand, your race, and you go through your day, and this is reinforced throughout your day. But for most white Americans, it's not the case. So when there's a discussion about race, some of it is just foreign because it's not something that you have to deal with. And so I think it's really having that moment of, one, understanding who it is you're with, but then two, finding the safety to be able to say, okay, this isn't something I know, and I want to learn more. I think within that, there's also lots of resources online, as well as different books and things that one can get to help to fully understand, one, individual racial identity and how that changes and how between people and even people within groups. But two, it can also, you can find multiple things that you can learn more about yourself and about other people, so that some of the fear or the unsafe feelings are, what if I say the wrong thing? And this can help with that. When someone is going through a curriculum like this or in a discussion like this, though, the other piece of the puzzle is definitely being open, and maybe presenting that I'm not really sure how to word this, or I'm not an expert, so I'm asking this question. But if the person that you're speaking to takes offense to it or expresses to you that there was something about that they didn't like, it's an excellent learning opportunity for you rather than saying, oh, I wasn't trying to be racist, oh, I'm not racist, oh, these things, to say, huh, okay, well, note to self, maybe it's the way that I worded that. And actually, even asking the person, like, what can I do differently? I apologize. Because these conversations are very difficult, and it's going to be a learning experience for everybody involved.
Yeah, I guess what I've learned is doing some of this work is that a lot of it is kind of like self disclosure and asking consent. Is it like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
this is what I'm feeling, and is it okay if I say this, or what, how I'm going to say it like this, or should I say it like that? And a lot of it is, I mean, it's pretty tough work. So after issues are identified or ideas are identified, how does the person kind of progress through the curriculum, and kind of what is the ultimate goal, or what are some goals and objectives when people complete this curriculum?
So one of the big goals is to create your own action plan, right? Like, what comes next? Because what may be next for me as someone who is very well versed in this area is not going to be the same as what comes next for someone who maybe doesn't necessarily understand the premise of race in general. And so there's three action plans, one for 1 month, one for 3 months, and one for 6 months afterwards. Whether it's just, I'm going to read more, or I'm going to open my ears to these conversations more. Or, as you mentioned, I'm going to, if I have a question, I'm going to ask permission. Whatever the case is, this person will create their own action plan for where they go and continue this work. Because when the curriculum is over, the growth is not over. This is just skimming the beginning. But in each session, we go from really just learning what is race, what is prejudice, what is oppression, what is racism, to getting into the nitty gritty of what are health disparities, and how those two interact. What is systemic racism? What's the difference between systemic racism and institutional racism? And really looking at different viewpoints that allow those who are going through the curriculum to kind of get a better idea of how these things impact their practice every day. Because I promise you, every family physician who's working, no matter if you are in a rural area where the majority of your patients are white, or you're working in a very inner city area where the majority of your patients are not, this is something that is going to impact them in one way or another. So just kind of helping them to kind of get this understanding. And then I think the other piece of the puzzle is the idea of advocacy. So as we think about the laws that we're making, as we're thinking about different policies, as we're even thinking about, the things we hear from colleagues or other people, things other people may say, how can we be advocates, and how can we ensure that we have safe spaces, not just for us to do this learning, but also safe spaces for others who might not be like us to just merely exist.
And this might be too early to ask, but have you been able to do some evaluation of the curriculum to see if it's working? Have you been able to make some tweaks in the curriculum, or is it too early to say kind of at that point?
We are a little too early to say, to be honest with you. But at this point in time, I actually will be utilizing this curriculum. Heart of Ohio in Columbus is going to be starting a fourth year medical student rotation for students to kind of learn more about health equity and about what it's like to work in a federally qualified health center. And so we'll be utilizing this curriculum to kind of help them to better understand some of the things that our patients are going through. And this is not just a situation that happens, where we talk about Black patients and white patients per se, but this is all different racial groups. So for our very, very diverse population, you might have some populations who will come in who will be very open with you and tell you everything. And you'll have some populations that may not say as much because they don't trust you. And so how is it that we navigate kind of these situations? How is it that I, as a physician, can really make sure my patients understand I get it. I get the struggles, I get the barriers, and I'm here to help you to navigate those.
So, are you aware? I mean, has there been other curriculum been created, across the country or regionally? Are you that you're aware of, or is this kind of the first that's been kind of put together in this fashion, in this manner?
So I do know that there are multiple curricula around the country that different people are using, and like I mentioned, some of those have to do with the different curricula that are available by STFM, as well as the Everyone Project. And that was one thing for me, that it was like there are so many resources out here. It's really about making sure that we're utilizing them properly, and we have so many opportunities. It wouldn't make sense for me to just like make another resource where all of these people have already made the resources. We just have to know how to use them. So it's more so a guide of using these resources for as far as our curriculum is concerned. We did create a curriculum at Ohio State when I was a resident. So I worked with Dr. Radstetter in kind of creating a health equity curriculum. I worked on the resident-led portion. So my job was to kind of create a almost like a specialty track in health equity, and for residents who are more interested in getting more information and really, getting the leadership experience out of it. And then he worked on kind of a generalized health equity curriculum that would be utilized during our didactic sessions and for all of the residents. And we were able to get some statistically significant improvements in self-efficacy for residents. So you had residents saying, I don't know how to do this at the beginning, and at the end saying, I've learned where I feel either comfortable or I feel like I know what I need to know in order to get them to the person who will be comfortable in helping our patients out. So yeah, there are plenty of different opportunities for these curricula around the country, and they all differ. So it's really interesting to see how many places have kind of trialed these, and how many places, they tweak them as they go, but how it all works.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. I mean, this area. I mean, obviously it's very important, but it's just been so interesting how it's just been this area, especially in academics, has really kind of exploded, and the interest in it. Obviously, it's needed. Um, have you been able to? I would imagine so, like networking with some of your peers and colleagues on not only your curriculum, but with health equity in general to see are how you're doing things in Columbus. Is it different than what they're doing in other areas of the country, or obviously we're just kind of going towards the same goal. So just kind of curious if your networking kind of conversations with your colleagues.
Absolutely. It's really funny because the same way that, the specialty of family medicine has family med docs who are really interested in women's health, or family med docs who are really interested in sports med. There is this section of us that are really interested in these topics as well. One of my friends, Dr. Rock, actually created a health equity curriculum up in New York City. And so I've talked to him about it, and kind of we've thrown ideas back and forth. I think the thing that makes this curriculum a little different is the educational framework behind it. Because I'm currently a doctorate in education candidate, so I went back to school,
Wow.
and so I'm getting actual formal learning on how to teach this material. My specialty is in multicultural and anti-racist education, so having that other piece of the puzzle, I think, is a little different because, like as I said, all of these resources we have are incredible. And we've got so many opportunities to learn and use so many different things, but it's about how we use them. And that educational training that I'm getting is helping me to better understand not only how the mind learns, right? How we learn, but also how we need to present information in order for people to learn it in the way we want them to. And so if we're able to present the information in a way that, like our regular, let's say, lectures from medical school, where we're kind of going down all of these things as facts, as many of our definitions and things are, and we completely leave out the emotional work that's happening for a lot of people, they shut down. And it's really difficult to do this kind of work and have these kind of conversations without that, versus utilizing some of the, as I mentioned, transformational learning, as well as like social emotional learning techniques that they utilize in school to help people to be able to say, this is what I'm feeling. Because as physicians, to be very honest, when we're in the classroom learning, there are few conversations about what we're feeling while we're learning it. And so, how do we kind of make space for that and allow people to understand that, yes, this is difficult material. And it seems like it would be so easy. It's a handful of different definitions that you need to know, and it kind of dives you in deeper. But if we're not working on that emotional piece, it's very easy to just not do the additional work, and you get the transfer of knowledge. They know, but in order for them to use those skills that we really want them to develop and to be able to make change for their patients, it's just not there.
My guest is Dr. Christen Johnson, superstar family medicine physician from Columbus. So yeah, thank you so much for just explaining all that. I mean, every time I talk to somebody about this, I just learn so much more. As we start to kind of close up our conversation this evening, if there's anything I missed, feel free to mention that. But maybe leave our audience as well, just kind of with your belief and your passion for health equity, especially if there are people out there, especially like medical students or even family docs or even people in the community who are just like, I don't really get health equity. If you can just explain that to them and your passion about it as we start to close up our conversation this evening.
So I want to kind of take us on a small journey here. And all of us remember when vaccines had first come out for COVID, everybody kind of took a bit of a sigh of relief as far as physicians knowing that, okay, we now have something, we can protect ourselves, we can protect our families. Um, And yet, with every new variant that has come out, all of us have kind of clutched our pearls waiting to see what the research was going to say about these variants and our vaccines, right? Like, is this going to work? And then we get Omicron, which has thrown life for a loop. Yes, our vaccines do help to prevent severe disease, but our vaccines, unfortunately, are not 100%. They're not 90% anymore. So people can still be completely vaccinated and boosted and get sick. And then we think about where this came from, right? So we think about your major countries who've been at the table having the discussions about what next steps we need to take. And then we specifically think about the areas in South Africa that maybe don't have access to all of them having running water, or the way that there are multiple people packed into very small areas. I had an opportunity to actually go to South Africa and work in one of their primary care centers as a resident. If you have that opportunity, I definitely would recommend it. I absolutely loved it. But during this opportunity, I saw something that I didn't see here. The lines for care were obscenely long. And when you went to the emergency room, there wasn't a CT, there was an x ray. And if you needed a CT or an MRI, you were going to have to be shipped out 2.5 hours away from your home in order to get it. And here in America, especially in rural areas, we can have some of these same issues. However, here in America, we kind of have some different conversations about how we're dealing with that. But in South Africa, they had a very large shortage of vaccines. And there was a lot of discussion about how do we handle that. And unfortunately, we didn't handle it soon enough because we had a variant that came out of South Africa and spread across the world within days. So, in knowing that, we have to think about whose voice is at the table and whose isn't. The person who's riding the bus, the person who's working in the grocery store, the person who might be cleaning hotel rooms, if they don't have the healthcare that they need, if anything has taught us how interconnected we are, it's COVID, right? If these people don't have the healthcare that they need, we don't either. And so, in order to make sure that we have everyone have an opportunity to be healthy, everyone have an opportunity to live the way that they are supposed to live, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, the way we do that is health equity. It's ensuring that we make sure that every single person in this country has an opportunity to be able to find good doctors, to be able to get the care they need. I can tell you from my experiences, I was told as a medical student and an undergrad, my passion about race, about my passion about sexism, my passion about living an anti-oppressive life was not my lane as a physician. And for all of those people who told me that, it kind of makes me chuckle because my passion has carved out this space for me to be able to do not only what I love in taking care of patients, but also to help to make the change that we need to make in our country and in our world to ensure everybody has what they need. So for anybody who's super passionate about health equity, keep it up. For those who have questions and want to know more, AAFP, as I said, has some incredible resources, especially through the Everyone Project. And definitely there are lots of opportunities just in the atmosphere of Google to figure out kind of new things that maybe you didn't know. But making sure that we're taking care of inner city patients, making sure that we're taking care of rural patients, making sure that we're taking care of all of our patients should be all of our business.
That is a great way to end our conversation tonight. Dr. Christen Johnson, I'm so energized now. That's why I love talking with family docs on the show. Just like with everything going on, I love talking with people who are very passionate about and they're good at what they do. Thank you for our conversation tonight. And, there's information there to get more information. And obviously, we'll bring you back because you're doing a lot of great and incredible stuff. And again, like you said, shout out to the mentors. Mentors have helped me, mentors have helped you. Mentors, we're all out here for each other. So that ends our program tonight for Bite Size Learning. Go to ohioafp.org to see more conversations and past shows. And until next time, good night, everybody. Bye.